Welcome to this special speaker series. We're so pleased to have David Ammett, the Director of Preservation Utah, and a homegrown genius. I'm Robert Falk, Chair of the Holladay Historical Commission. I'd like to welcome members of our City Council. I know Holladay City's mayor and members of the City Council. And I'm going to turn the time to Kim Duffy from the Historical Commission to do a fuller introduction, our speaker.
Hi, I'm Kim Duffy. David told me not to go on and on about him, so I won't. But I will say this. He travels the state of Utah advocating for our historic sites. But he's also been busy in Holladay, too. He advocated for a cluster of mid-century modern homes down by the Cottonwood Club, which are now part of their own historic district. And he also nominated his grandparents' home, which is now on the National Register, Ross Haynes. So we'll hear more about that. So thank you, and we'll hear what he has unearthed about the great estates of Mill Creek and Holladay.
Thank you very much. Now I guess I better say something. This is really a treat for me to be in Holladay, in part because I grew up here. And it's easy to love a place that you call home, right? And so when I'm in Holladay, I'm very much at home. And in fact, tonight I'd have the treat of seeing old neighbors that I knew when I was growing up on Applewood Avenue, and old faces from days gone by. So I thank all of you for coming. This is a cold night. The days are drying in. It's dark outside, but you have made it, and I really appreciate it. And I hope that I prove to be worth the time. I did give this lecture, let's see. Well, maybe I just tell you to advance. I'll just tell you, Tessa. I did give this lecture 2 years ago when Preservation Utah was hosting a home tour of houses along Holladay Boulevard and Kentucky Avenue. And I found this clip from the Murray Eagle, which used to be, before Holladay became its city, its own city, and before Holladay really even developed. Murray was Holladay's downtown. So there was a lot of reference to Holladay in Murray's local paper, the Murray Eagle. And I really loved this quote, which comes out of the heart of the Great Depression, when people were looking for cheer. And the recommendation in the passage from this newspaper article is, you need cheer, go to Holladay. Holladay's well-kept homes, deep map of green lawn, the tapestry of shrubbery, the neat bloom of orchards, the shade trees, the richness of gardens, and the profusion of flowers reflect the industry, the happiness, the contentment and prosperity of Holladay. When things look bad and joys are few, the sun is always shining. The clouds may hide his face from view. There is a silver lining. Depressions show the darkest clouds and everything confining. Then why not come to Holladay and get a silver lining? So I guess that's advice we've all followed, at least tonight. Right? Can you go ahead and advance the next slide? Oh, maybe it's actually working from here. Yeah. I'm going to talk a lot about Holladay's great estates, and by great estates, I don't know how else to say it. We're not going to be talking about farms. We're not going to be talking about little cottages. This is the story of the rich and famous. All right. So there's a little bit of that. We can all be thinking about them and the legacy that they left here in Holladay. And there is a story of the rich and famous here in Holladay because for many, many years, Holladay was the Hamptons of the Salt Lake area. And I will talk a little bit about that, but I do want to stress that thus far, none of the houses that I'm going to highlight on this during this presentation are on the Holladay's Historic Registry, and that's something I've been working with Robert and Kim and a lot of the other members of the of the commission here, the Historic Commission here in Holladay on. I think this is an important story because the architectural legacy that these people left in Holladay is as rich as anything that you would find on South Temple, in part because the South Temple set came here to summer, all right? So there is a really important legacy of architecture and history, some of which I will focus on to some extent. Sorry, this is a little gimpy. But before I get my talk, I should tell you a little bit more about myself. I'm an architectural historian. I love buildings. What I love most about buildings is they are a great way to learn about people. The people who lived in them, the people who built them. Maybe I'll just speak loud. Does that work? The people who lived in them, the people who built them, the people who encoded their dreams and the brick and steel and windows of these properties. And that's especially true of the set of properties that we're dealing with tonight. And so I am an architectural historian, but I lean more heavily to the social side of things. I also believe in the material culture, the things we surround ourselves with, not just the walls and the ceilings and the roofs, but the objects that we surround ourselves with, we use to tell people about ourselves. So I have a little bit of material culture to introduce to all of you, especially towards the end of the talk. So that could tell you a little bit about how I will approach this talk. We will focus on architecture, but I like architecture because it gets me the people. And so we're going to be focusing a lot on the people behind these buildings, all right? And I also believe material culture, like architecture, is a great way that people use to tell people about ourselves without even saying a word. So we're going to bring a little bit of that in. But let's discuss why Holladay. Why are we getting this talk about West Valley, or Midvale, or Sandy? I think even just looking at this map, which I pulled off Google Images tonight, you can get a sense of what a unique position Holladay is in, especially in terms of its natural resources. I have the pointer, so I don't. I'm going to use my finger. All of this is what? Sage green, dry green. There's one exception, right, to that sage green. And all of you will see it here. And also a little bit of this is in Mill Creek, along here. What does this green represent? What does this green represent? It represents the presence of water. Right? Water coming down from Big Comet Canyon, filling this area. Even today, it's notable on aerial maps of the Salt Lake Valley. The same thing here, and maybe a handful of other places, all right? So from the get-go, Holladay had what few other places, really no other place in the Salt Lake Valley development, which was verdant, green, luxurious foliage made possible by water. It's the perfect place to summer. I'm going to talk about now the houses and the people behind them. I really divided our story into 3 chapters. I'm going to talk about the rustic period, the first sort of settlement, summer settlement of Holladay and Mill Creek happened around 1880 to 1905, the suburban country house period from 1905 to 1935, and then a little bit of the California influence that creeped into Holladay from 1925 on through the 30s and into the mid-20th century. This is a wonderful column from the Salt Lake Tribune. It sort of describes society here in Holladay at the end of the 19th century, at the beginning of the 20th century. I think this is a great place to launch into our discussion of buildings and sort of help frame your understanding and your perception of how Holladay functioned at this turn of the century moment. Sooner or later, Salt Lake's fashionables will appreciate the value of its suburban residence tracts. When they're talking about suburban residence tracts here, they're not really talking about, I don't know, symphony homes, driveway homes, right? These are basically farms and estates, especially in relationships with fashionables in Salt Lake. No city in the West is so favored in this respect, and with a growing population, those of the wealthier class will establish palatial homes in the shadows of the high Wasatch, while those with moderate means will equally enjoy a less pretentious summer home where cooling streams rushes by, crushing the canyon. And again, with reference to water, what does water help you to do in the summer besides drink? Especially in this era, it is your air conditioning unit. Do all of you, it hasn't been that long, all of you remember June, July, August, and even September of this year, and how unbearable it was? How many of you turned on your air conditioning units? At least once. I bet you all did. Probably once every hour, right? Imagine if you didn't have that opportunity, and you were in an apartment building or a house in the middle of what was, by 1905, a concrete jungle in the middle of Salt Lake. Wouldn't you want to escape? And how do you escape? You buy a house in Holladay close to a stream, and it's really not an accident that all of these great estates, at least the vast majority of them, are located right on streams, because that is your air conditioning unit. You get up on your sleeping porch, right over the stream on here, and you're able to sleep at night. The article then goes on to talk about several properties. It references Walker's Glenwood. It talks about the Moyle property. I'll get to both of these. And then it talks a lot about these other more sort of midland people, attorneys, residents, Ellis Hills of the Desert National Bank. He's not middling, but anyway. Let's get to some of these houses. This is the Hills house, called Hillwood, and I have no idea where this was located. And I'm happy to make this a conversation. If anyone knows where some of these houses were located, just shout it out, right? This is that attorney's, or that bank president's house, and it's a very nice house, right? I mean, I'd be happy living there, especially if that was just my summer house, which this functioned as. The date, by the way, is wrong. It's not 1920. This is much earlier than that. This is about 1900 to 1905. We move on. This is a really spectacular residence. That, I think, was sacrificed to IP-15. No. No? I don't think so. Well, it's not standing enough. Because we discussed this, Scott.
This is the Judge family. This stood until very recently, and I want to say whoever built a copy of Versailles in Holladay bought it and demolished it. I don't know which copy of Versailles is referred to. President Choir. There you go.
This is a wonderful house. I think it shows, I mean, all of us would look at this house and say, what a mansion, right? What a spectacular property. But it was really, really a rustic dwelling. The use of natural materials. I grew up in Holladay, so I know what's in our soil, right? You dig down 5 inches and you're hitting one of these rocks. They're everywhere, right? And the judges put this to good use and built a house out of that. So in the winter, they'd be on South Temple with the judge house. And in the summer, they come out and rusticate in their summer palace made of stone. I love the interior of this one. Because the hallway is like some feudal castle with its stone fireplace rising from the ceiling. I don't have a picture, at least there wasn't a very good picture from the state archives of the interior of the judge home, so I pulled this one of the Matthew Walker house. But that was the South Temple interior. The judges would have had something akin to this, and this is where, you would relax and unbutton your tie and spend summer. You can tell, right? You wouldn't necessarily put a deer over your fireplace on South Temple, but you would here, and it's rustic, and it's also very comfortable and very nice, right? Now, do all of you know the Judge story? They really are a remarkable family. They're Irish. People who, I think both sides. Mother, Mary Judge, who Judge Memorial High School was named after. And, was it John Judge? They make their money in money. They leave Ireland, they come over across the ocean to escape the potato famine. They end up in New York. They realize New York has happened, the West is happening, and they come out and they get involved with the Kerns and some of those other people in Park City, and that's how they make their money. This is, of course, I mean, that photo, right? You have to have a personality. Hold on, that one, right? Fingering your face with that 15,000 carat diamond ring. You all know who this is. This is Susan Susanna Bransford. Her full title is Her Royal Highness. She does marry into European royalty eventually. She's a woman who keeps marrying well, right? Keeps marrying and marrying her. Her Royal Highness Susanna Egeria Bransford Emery Holmes Heathcliff English. And of course, she lives in the best house, one of the grandest houses ever constructed in all of Utah, which is the Gardow House, right? The Gardow House is the work of William Folsom, Joseph Bridges, constructed originally, as most of you know, for Brigham Young and one of his wives, who he designates as the official hostess for his family. But ultimately, it's sold after Brigham Young's death, and it goes through, well, I think it goes through a couple of others, doesn't it, before it reaches Her Royal Highness. And that's where she winters, but she summers in a house that fortunately is still standing on Evergreen Avenue, there in Oak Creek. And that's Oakwood. And notice the stream. Notice the proximity between the house and the stream, which fortunately still runs by. Again, this is the air conditioning, and originally these would be wonderful seating porches where you could catch the breeze off the water. So you see this in Holladay, but you also see it in Mill Creek. And this is just a lot of these houses I'm just shoving at you at the initial launch of my talk because I don't know how else to fit them in. But this is, for all of you Mill Creek people, who's here from Mill Creek? Oh, good, a good number of you. This is an absolute treasure. This is now it's the sort of clubhouse for Old Farm on 7th East, and what is it, 39th South? So many houses in Holladay, and Mill Creek used to look like this. These were not necessarily the mansion-like Somerton estates, but rather more the farm estates and the farm-focused estates, and they're really quite humble, especially when you consider the families behind them. This is the Holladay family, who goes Old Farm. And one of my favorite stories of Old Farm relates tangentially to architecture. And I don't think we have time to tell it, but I just have to. I'm sorry. Probably going to keep you a little bit after the hour. But one of the Hobo's most prominent relatives was Harry Thaw. Does that mean anything to anybody? There's kind of a fun song about Harry Thaw and his relationship to the girl on the red velvet swing. Evelyn Nesbit. Does that mean anything to anyone? I want to tell you this, there's a really catchy song. I don't want to sing. I think I remember it. I don't know. This actually comes from the musical
Ragtime.
Not Ragtime. It is Ragtime. No. So it starts, and usually it's sung by an actor playing Evelyn Nesbit. So usually female, all right? But it starts, Your Honor, I was once the lady friend of Stanford White. He's a famous architect. Yes, that's right. Well, you know Stanford White. He put me on a velvet swing and made me wear, well, hardly anything. It ruined by the age of 50. And then I went ahead and married Mr. Harry Thaw, eccentric millionaire. Oh, no, Harry's a jealous man. Bang, bang. That was the end of Stan. Oh, no, Your Honor, take care. My Harry went crazy, I swear. Evelyn Nesbit, the most admired woman of the Edwardian era in America, has this claim with Stanford White. The architect, right? And then she marries Harry Thaw,
Harry Potter Jealous, and she and Stanford White on the roof of the Madison Square Garden building, which Stanford White has just constructed, in the shadow of this huge gilt, nude as you might imagine, considering, Stanford White, statue of Venus, right, which looms over the Manhattan skyline, which is really funny that, this city, which rather conservative, now is marked by this huge statue of Venus, which, by the way, is in the atrium of the Philadelphia Museum of Art today. And Harry thought, of course, his mother gets the very best lawyers, is able to get off on the plea of temporary insanity. She doesn't want her son's, Harry thought's mother, who's very controlling woman, does not want her son to be associated with permanent insanity. So they said he had a brainstorming session. Which caused him to shoot Stanford White. Of course, after he ultimately gets out of jail, due to these fantastic lawyers, where does he go? He's not welcome in the Hamptons in New York City, but he does have relatives on the West Coast, and he's quiet and passionate when it comes to Holladay. And he's entertained in Old Park as he's visiting the Holladay. It's amazing when you look at some of the newspaper articles published about Harry Potter's visit. They're very careful. But when we call him a man of high attraction, so he goes to Old Farm, and then I will point out he attends a movie show, even by 1915. This is a 1915 article. Movies are important, and that is important for another chapter of my talk. But in all seriousness, the story of Holladay and to some extent Mill Creek and its development as a place for the rich and famous to summer really is launched by the Walker family. And of course, all of you who grew up in this area are familiar with Walker Lane, right? And a little bit about the Walker story. Does anyone know actually anything about the Walker story? So you're not just hearing me talk. What is the Walker? Well, I know you know. Anyone else? When I was growing up in Holladay, what's that?
A bunch of brothers.
Bunch of brothers. Yeah, it actually starts in West Yorkshire, right? So Middle England, with a family who is really, really smart and super hardworking, but not well born. All right? Matthew and Mercy Walker are some of the most impressive people I've met while researching Utah history. Matthew is a trader in wool. He doesn't actually, and wool is a complicated thing. Wool actually requires 14 different steps to process from the back of the sheep to that sweater that you're wearing. 14 different steps. So it's a long process, and there's money to be made in each of the processes. Matthew is born into a family that really only adopts old wool clothing that people want to get rid of, that they're then able to refine and reprocess into new wool clothing. So he's kind of on the second-hand side of the business. He's smart, he's industrious, and he's able to work himself up into another far more lucrative middleman part of this processing of wool. And then the Industrial Revolution is taking hold of England, especially, right, in that area near Manchester and Leeds. And he sees signs in the smoke, right, that these factories are going to replace the traditional wool processing that has really taken root in this part of England and employed people in this part of England for the last 500 years. What he's able to do is he's able to cash out, and he buys an inn, so he becomes an innkeeper. And then, this guy does so much better than I have, he essentially retires and becomes a country gentleman by age 36. So he goes from poverty to essentially a country squire by age 36, and he builds a house, I'll get back to this, that is pretty nice. This is not Downton Abbey, but it's also not the slums of London, right? This is a comfortable house, and that is where he raises his boys, right? Most of his boys know this as their childhood. This is their reality. All right? And here are the boys. We have Matthew, Mercy, and then we have Joseph, Rob, Samuel, Sharp, Matthew, and David or Fred, as he's oftentimes referred to. So these boys grow up in relative comfort until Matthew makes a very bad investment. It's an industrial revolution. There are trains being built all over London to get all these goods, wool and steel and whatever else, cubic clocks and whatever else, to the markets. How could you go wrong with a railroad? So that's what happens. Matthew and Mercy invest in a railroad, and then the railroad goes belly up, and so do they. And Matthew is forced to go back to selling wool, to dealing with that type of merchandise, which is an intense humiliation for him. In many respects, this is a blessing, because in order to keep the family fed, he has to essentially take his sons out of schools, regular schools, getting their education, becoming professional men, and he has to teach them by hook and by crook the mercantile business. They have to learn as well. So he has, especially his two oldest sons, Joseph and Samuel, they're already working, I think they're about 7 or 8. And they're pulled out of their comfortable childhood and put to the streets to help the family make their daily bread. All right? And then the rest of the children follow. Well, in this position, you can understand Matthew and Mercy are looking for another way to do life. They don't see themselves as really being in a position to make back the money in the way that they did initially. Where do they go? Well, there's this exciting place called America. And somehow they meet an Irish merchant who is also a Mormon. And they learn about the Mormon church, and they decide to sell flags. And to read about this family journey west is to read about horror after horror. They get on board a leaky vessel, basically a sponge, and they sail across the Atlantic Ocean with rancid water and rancid food, and then they head out to Mississippi, where they're going to be let off in St. Louis and take a wagon west. But there's a huge cholera epidemic, and Matthew dies, the father dies, as does one of their daughters. And they basically have to throw their bodies into the Mississippi and somehow carry on. And then when they get to let off the boat in St. Louis after the cholera epidemic passes, they have to spend this awful 6 weeks on this riding steamship, because they couldn't afford less travel, so they're just going by cheap. And then they have to basically earn enough money to get to Utah. That's another sort of blessing in disguise. What they could do is fall in with a merchant in St. Louis who teaches the boys even more of the merchant, selling merchandise tricks than they learned from their father. And then when they've learned enough, they come west. And this is where our story actually gets worse. Let's see. I guess I don't have. Anyway, this is fine. When we get west, they're essentially starving, and they have no way to make food. They have a little garden. They live in a hovel log cabin. They have no way really to pull themselves up. So what they decide to do is get on board some of the work projects that the Mormon Church is hosting at that time, including building the tabernacle, including building the social hall, and most importantly, the temple. They worked for 3 weeks on digging the temple's foundations. And they're really counting on the money for the items, food, clothing, whatever that they expect to receive after the 3 weeks of hard toil. Unfortunately, when they go to get their pay, as many of you might know, the LDS Church says we're not paying you anything, you owe back title. And so instead of getting food, they're tied in trouble. But that's not what they want. They want food. And at that point, there's a real rupture between the walkers and the LDS church, which continues the rest of their lives, and they butt heads with Brigham Young for the rest of their lives. As many of you know. They get through the next several winters, next several summers by planting gardens, harvesting timber in the local mountains. Ultimately, their big break comes when they're able to hook onto a merchant who has associations with Johnson's army. And all of you know the story of Johnson's army. They come out, right, ready to take over Utah, and then ultimately it becomes a big boondoggle. And those soldiers are pulled from Utah once the Civil War begins, and they leave all sorts of goodies. Well, it's the Walker brothers in association with their friends, this mercantile network that they have somehow been able to ingratiate themselves with, that are able to take all the goodies from Johnson's army and sell them at a very high profit and sell it. And from there, they launch. Can I just add, the reason I have these photos is because they're in, as you can see, the collection of the Marriott Library of the University of Utah. And I think it's really sort of touching. I've wondered about the history of these photos. I don't think those boys ever forgot their childhood home. Because at some point, they sent a photographer, or they had relatives that went back to photograph the house. I know they didn't take these pictures with them on the wagon train in 1848, right? The fact that they have these photos in their papers in the University of Utah's archives suggests that this is a lifestyle, this is a home, this is a place they never forgot. And the very existence of these photos, I think, suggests as much. The Walker brothers start their store through the Johnson Army proceeds. We have Walker Brothers store. And then, because they are not associated with the Mormon crowd, but rather, as we oftentimes like to say here in Utah, the Gentile crowd, all those miners, right, Brigham Young didn't want his crowd to be mining, so all those miners who are not LDS, who are not Mormon, start to deposit their gold and their silver and their money with the Walkers, and out of these little deposits grows a bank. And that is how the Walker Bank starts. It starts with the store, the trust they build, especially with the mining crowd, and then they're able to develop a bank. And then they start investing in mines themselves. They own over a dozen mines, and then they build a hotel and an opera house. They're also investing in civic projects at the Alamo. Right. And they're also investing in their own houses. So this is a block space along Main Street in Salt Lake, which used to be occupied by the, what hotel? Newhouse Hotel. Newhouse Hotel. And then it's been a parking lot since the 80s. Right? But before Samuel Newhouse developed his hotel, it was the Walker Brothers' houses right there on Main Street. That block now faces the Grand America, right? Or it's getting north of the Grand America.
Yes, a whole block between 4th and 5th South on Main Street, and they own a lot through to West Temple.
Yeah.
As income property.
And this is Matthew Walker's house, and you can see, Matthew's was here,
Yes.
and then all the other brothers, the three brothers, built houses along here. All right, and they live together. And then, of course, as I said, you want to be in these houses as nice as they are in the summer, in the heat of the summer in Salt Lake? No, you don't. So what do? You buy a farm in Holladay. They call this the fish farm. So here's the Walker fish farm. I love these photos too. The fact that they took them is just amazing. You would walk up, this is at the upper part of Walker Lake. You go through this long driveway, you go past this pond, which I think eventually is called Cheeseman's Pond. One of the Walker daughters marries a man named Cheeseman, and they take this piece of land. And then you eventually get to a house called Woodwood. And this is their summer house. And the house is relatively simple until you think it was built in 1875. This is a really incredible summer house for 1875. Had this long piazza which stretched the front of the property. You can imagine, right? Long summer afternoons there. And then we go on horse rides to the property. I love that it says Glenwood. I think this says 1875 is what I could use to the better image. You go on long carriage rides through the property. You go fish in the pond. You go swim in the pond. If any of you guys want a treat, who doesn't want a treat? Go to the special collections at the Marriott Library and find a diary written by Charlotte Gilchrist, who was a friend of the Walkers and spent many long summers at the fish market at Glenwood. And she describes the most idyllic way to pass the summer. Right? Picnics, hunting, carriage rides. Sometimes they jet up to Big Common Canyon to the top of Big Common Canyon where the walkers have a little cabin and then they conduct a fish farm. And it's funny, at every point she can conclude this line, she stresses it. She says, the best thing about the summers at the Walker House was the devil and no more. Charlotte Gilchrist describes the house. The farmhouse was situated about 1 mile from the mountains in a grove of trees. It was a one-story frame building, 40 feet front, with a plaza extending the entire length. So that's the diary from 1881. At this point, I'm going to sort of refine my lexicon here, the vocabulary I'm using to describe these various properties. I've been describing them as estates. But a better word to use to describe this and every other property is a villa. Because the word villa places these properties into a long history of country living and country life that even stretches back to antiquity. I took a Renaissance villa class in graduate school, and I always have to smile whenever I'm dealing with a budget or some other aspects of, day-to-day life. I took a Renaissance villa class in graduate school instead of accounting 101 or business 101. In fact, I think that comes to my accountant regularly. I don't know the answer to that. It was in Renaissance villas. So there's only been 2 times in that class that served me well. One was the first time I gave this lecture back in 2019, and the other one is tonight. So I'm going to use it. The book we used for that class on Renaissance villas was written by a really brilliant architectural historian named James Ackerman. And he wrote this book on Renaissance villas, which really placed the villa in the center of Renaissance life, where everyone else had ignored it. He says a villa really was integral to the Renaissance. So what are we talking about when we talk about Renaissance? I want to be very clear that we're talking about the birth of modernity. All right? These are the people who invented the world in which we all live now. So they are not incidental to our even day-to-day experience. Among other things, they invented, or rather they resurrected, the idea of the villa. And the villa, according to James Ackerman, really has certain traits that make it a villa as opposed to a estate or just a large house with a big lawn, right? Among other things, the purpose of the villa is a building in the country designed for its owners' enjoyment and relaxation. It's not a farm where you wake up at 3 a.m. to milk cows, right? It's not what the villa is all about. It's enjoyment and relaxation. But it may also be the center of an agricultural enterprise. The pleasure factor, or at least the veneer of pleasure, is what essentially distinguishes the villa residence from the farmhouse and the villa estate from the farm. Okay? Is that clear? There's an urban-country relationship. The villa cannot be understood apart from the city. It exists not to fulfill autonomous functions, but to provide a counterbalance to urban values and accommodations. This is an old idea that even goes back to classical Rome. There's the idea of otium and negotium. Negotium is business, right? That's what you do in the city. The otium is the pleasure that you encounter when you go leave the city for the countryside, all right? This is important. Provides a county balance for room values and accommodations, and its economic situation is that of the satellite. Consequently, the fate of the villa has been intimately tied to that of the city and on an idealized version of country life. All right? When Marie Antoinette dressed as a shepherdess in her villa at Versailles, she really, wrinkled the sheep into a pen. It's not the idea of the villa, right? It's that idol of country life, that image of country life without dealing with the messy realities, mucking out a stall, or birthing a pig. Ownership really has a lot to do with your expression of wealth. Your business owner goes out to the villa to express wealth. The acquisition of the villa has generally experienced possible only for persons of wealth and usually of prestige and power, is nevertheless a bourgeois concept in the strict sense of the word, responding to the perceived needs of the city dweller, right? So it's basically the anecdote to the stressful city life. And of course, this has ancient roots. You go to Herculaneum, for example, you can see the villa of the pirate. The reason why it shows that villa with billions of other ancient Roman villas that exist is because it's been recreated in Malibu. And you can get a sense of how luxurious these places were. The important thing is, in antiquity, architectural observers like Pliny write about their experiences in the villa. And of course, by miracle, these manuscripts survived through the Middle Ages. In part because a lot of these manuscripts are pretty practiced texts for monks to use to learn math, right? So they copied and they survived in dusty medieval libraries. And then in the Renaissance, of course, not just these capitalists, but inventors of capitalism themselves, right? Who build beautiful buildings like the Piazza Vecchio, or the Palazzo Vecchio, right? In Florence with David, and what does all of this represent? It represents art and culture. But for these Renaissance people, what does it really represent? It represents money, right? Money that they get through the invention of banking, through the invention of modern mercantilism, right? Through the invention of capitalism. They can pay for these things, and they're telling everyone they can pay for these things. And of course, it's good to do that in the city, but it's also good to do that in the country. You have to imagine how many villas do they own? 50 billion. One of the most impressive is just outside of Florence, called Poggio a Caiano. Poggio a Caiano is one of the 50 billion villas that the Medicis own. And the main banqueting hall of Poggio a Caiano is this beautiful fresco by an artist I really love from the late Renaissance, Contorno. This shows the story of Vertumnus and Pomona. Pomona is a woman who guards a garden, an orchard for the gods. And she's not let anyone in this orchard. Well, Vertumnus wants the fruit, and the fruit of the orchard, and so he dresses up like an old woman. And once he's led into the orchard, he seduces Pomona, and this is kind of their post-coital moment. So this is about ancient mythology, it's about Greece and Rome and all these cultural points that the Renaissance was all about. But let's not kid ourselves. This is also about abundance. These are not idealized, Greek gods. These are the farmers working at Poggio a Caiano who are producing abundant fruits and vegetables for the Medici to enjoy, bringing the bit of the outside onto the table inside in this banqueting hall, outside and inside, near each other perfectly. They're all in harmony and balance, made possible by financial wealth. All right? You almost don't need a God in this world, right? In the Middle Ages, they would have stuck God up here, organizing everything. But this doesn't need God. This is money. This is capitalism. orchestrating this. And what's interesting is this modernity, this expression of modernity, is passed on wherever modernity lands. Eventually, modernity leaves Italy, right? And it travels north. By the 18th century, are you hearing that much about Italy? No, you're not. You're hearing about Paris, you're hearing about London, these modern centers of the 18th and 19th century. You see villas appearing in England. Here's a particularly beautiful house called Chiswick House, modeled upon the drawings of an Italian architect called Holladay. So here you have modernity expressing itself through villas in England, and then when we get modernity in the United States, what happens? What are all these robber barons of the Gilded Age? What are they doing in the summer? Are they staying in hot? I mean, think of even the Great Gatsby, right? Where all those people live. They live in the Hamptons, right? You have villas here, and you have the same thing happening with the Walkers. There's an astonishing newspaper clipping in the Walker papers. I was just seeing this earlier today. You have Joseph Walker's letterpress book. And the letterpress book is filled with every single clipping related to Joseph Walker's business, particularly as it pertains to the store that they own and the bank. Out of the blue, all these business clippings, you have this clipping, which tells you, it's published in the Holladay Herald, this is 1880. It's amazing that the Holladay Herald would publish something like this. It tells you how to host a proper hunt at your country house. My favorite bit of advice, which I expect all of you to keep, is you hide your hunt band, the tubas and the drums, behind the screen of foliage. So out of the woods comes this wonderful music to inspire you as you hunt foxes. What's amazing is that this is a piece of newspaper clipping that the Walkers keep. And it's in their books today. But what, of course, are they trying to do? They're trying to copy their counterparts on the East Coast, their counterparts in Europe. You know, ultimately, they're trying to copy, right, the founders of this villa country life in Italy, and ultimately they're trying to copy, their predecessors in ancient Rome. There are other different approaches to this villa. This is the Moyle family. This is James Moyle, Alice Dinwiddie Moyle, and the family. James Moyle, who's here, has an interesting story. They are LDS, and James Moyle has a brilliant legal mind, and he asked the church officials, should I go and study law? And they say, absolutely not, you'll lose your way and go astray. He ignores them, he goes to the University of Michigan, and then he becomes one of the chief lawyers of the LDS church, and a lot of other people. He makes a lot of money, and he buys a farm, which is now located where the Common Club is. And this is Lakewood Road? Yeah. So that's how you get in to that farm, and they have a lake, and they have, gates and things like that. And this is the farmhouse, which is very much like the farmhouse that we saw at Old Farm, where the Hopkins have. All right? So it's not luxurious, it really is a farm, but it's also a pastime, right? We're not going to depend on the cow to produce so much milk in order to feed, kids. One thing that's interesting about this, I think it says a lot about society here. I did talk to one of the descendants of the Moyles who told me about growing up on this farm before it was transformed into the country club. And she talked a lot about how Holladay structured itself. And she said, growing up in Holladay was interesting. For the most part, we kept to ourselves, but we were very aware of all the parties happening on the Walker estate. And I said, well, did you enjoy it? Did you enjoy the fun? Wasn't this a happy, everybody enjoying life together? And she said, no, those were for wild parties, so we didn't go. And I thought, well, that's interesting. I think for the most part, people segregated themselves, like we still do today in Utah, right? For our favorite, tribes. And what's that constant question that we always ask people in Utah, are you Mormon or not Mormon? And, that's kind of happening here. And then also people segregated themselves, I think, by class. As you drove up Old Walker Lane, there were a lot of little houses. They've all been, for the most part, demolished. A lot of little houses, and who lived in those houses? One of the people who lived in those houses, was my second grade teacher, Mrs. Faulkner, who was associated with the Walkers. Their family worked for the Walkers. And I remember she did say once, this was an old memory, but she did indicate that, there was a set, right, born to marry, and then a set of those born, to serve the matter and actually make the thing work. So I think that's what's going on here. I'm going to pass, what time is it? Oh, geez, I really got to go. I'm going to pass really quickly to other chapters of history. When Salt Lake industrializes in the beginning of the 20th century, they're building all sorts of buildings, requiring architects. They're also producing a lot of things, right, that haven't been produced before, at least not on a mass consumption scale, including, of course, instrumentally the story of Holladay and Mildred, the Model T Ford, right? Model T Ford is invented in 1809, but is actually mass-produced beginning in 1913. And of course, the automobile changes everything. So after that, we suddenly see, oh, this is interesting, but I'm going to have to pass over it. We suddenly see the exchange in Holladay and Mill Creek, where these are no longer summer homes, no longer takes you a day to travel out of Salt Lake City to get to your farm, just, a matter of, half hour or so. So we see a different type of house. This is the George Raymond or Ray Walker house on Upper Walker Lane. It's really an amazing estate. It is designed by C.J. Craig, who designs the Walker Brothers store. He designs the Eagle Gate Apartments, the original Eagle Gate Apartments, and another number of other buildings. The gardens are designed by another architect named Alberto Tregonza. And Alberto Tregonza and Raymond Walker developed a huge friendship. Alberto Tregonza is an ornithologist, and he convinces Ray Walker to become an ornithologist. So all this property, this vast, expansive property, is declared a bird refuge. Until Raymond Walker, who runs the store, he's the second generation to run the store, runs into financial trouble in 1929, which is really the signal of the beginning of the closure of the Walker Brothers store. So the store closes, and then he's forced to sell off bits and pieces of his land the rest of his life to stay afloat. And that's how we get Redwood Circle, Baldwin and Redwood, or some of those other parcels that at least I grew up around. I didn't realize that was all part of the Ray Walker estate. Anyway, beautiful, amazing landscape. I will say that the landscape here and in many other locations really follows, like the houses do, a format that is laid down actually in Europe, in the Baroque era. It's called the Claudian landscape format. This is invented by an artist named Claude Brown, who, once we're done with formal Italianate gardens, opens up the landscape to actually have nature express itself. And you can see these in paintings in the Louvre and the National Gallery of Art. You have essentially a nature in minor bracket, a pond, and then some sort of shepherdess writing what she's doing. Laying on the side. And it's amazing how many landscapes of this era follow this Claudian format. In fact, even the humblest houses of this period in Holladay have their own little pond. There are so many little ponds in people's backyards dating from this period because it's just what you do. I should note that Ray Walker's yard is designed by Tregonza. You all see those pillars.
And this has been rather modified, rather changed. Probably the best place to see this is Wasatch Lawn. He designs the opening of Wasatch Lawn, and the pillars and the entranceway is exactly the same as what he uses in the Ray Walker estate. Go ahead.
What was the address to that last house that you were just discussing?
Oh,
I noticed it's like upper. It's 2480.
2480. There you go. It used to be the Livingston House, and then Nina Johnson lived there for 50 years, and now it's Gordon Bowen. Lots of architects coming into the city, developing buildings in town, these villas on the outskirts. We've already talked about C.J. Craig, Warren Dragonza. Let's just talk quickly about Harold Burton. Harold Burton designed everything from LDS temples to the Greek Orthodox Church to the Tribune building. He designs a real treasure of a house, which I know many people here are associated with. This is designed uniquely in a French, really sort of Breton style. And I think what Harold Burton is trying to do is design a house that will get people to hire him as an architect. And he plants himself in Walker Lane, I'm sure, because he wants to be there, but also he wants to use his house as essentially a billboard to advertise what he can do. And you see this style of house appear throughout Holladay as well as other styles, particularly in this period where you have people commuting now from Holladay into the city. This is a book called American Country Houses of Today. Apart from classical trends, which include many variants from their own villa to the Canadian Anglicism to the French tradition, particularly the Schwab building and the latest French Louise, there are, of course, the two modernist motives which most consistently suggest themselves to us in this land and generation. These two are colonial and the immortal predecessor thereof, standard type developed in England during the reigns of the last Tudors. But all of these colonials, this is a royal house. You have all of these Tudors. And tell me what these people are trying to do with their Tudors. I'm really trying to rush those people. I don't want to keep you here in trouble. What are they trying to do? Associate themselves with pedigree, right? They may have just been newly minted, right? They may have just made their money, but they've got old English roots, right? Praise there.
You realize that clock is an hour fast.
Oh, well, still, I gotta get out. I'm ready to be done. I'm sick of hearing myself. And then, of course, so we're talking 1905 to 1915. Then, of course, the world transforms. And a lot of these old associations between your local Southfield broker and your English baron are no longer in vogue. Why? What changes the world around 1950? It is, I think we ignore World War I, right? You just think America just disappears. But you have to remember how many millions of lives were snuffed out during that war. I think one of the best portrayals I've seen recently, in fact, I was in tears most of the weekend, because I watched this on Netflix. There's a wonderful new portrayal of a film of All Quiet on the Western Front. And this is the closing scene. It's so sad. I love the scene because, of course, above the boy who has suffered so much is the word Kaiser, right? What does that Kaiser represent? That aristocracy, that tradition, that hubris that has dragged the world into wars that end all wars. And suddenly, all of this association with European ancestry is not snuffed out overnight, but it suddenly is unfashionable. All right? And you see that in this is my grandmother's house on Holladay Boulevard. This is a fascinating house. It was built by a sugar beet guy who's going broke. And then suddenly, out of the blue, William Wrigley Jr. of the Red Sox, or the White Sox, and Catalina Island and Wrigley Spearmint Gum
decides to make this guy's sugar beet factory in Gunnison, Utah, of all places, the source of all the sugar that will flavor Wrigley Spearmint gum through the 1920s. This guy goes from broke to, quite comfortable, and he builds his house to celebrate. It's interesting, I have all sorts of stuff to show you, but I do not have time. When you go inside this house, especially in the space called ballroom, which is actually a rather dark basement room with pipes running all over it, the daughter of the architect, and this was designed by Larry Brianza, Walter Ware's daughter, Florence Ware, is an artist. She paints the City March at Kingsbury Hall, is probably her most notable. She paints all sorts of paint. I have one here of women from the court of Louis XIV. Women with huge pompadours and everything like that. Unfortunately, my grandmother in the 60s, when contrast fit, she loves green paint because green paint on everything. She paints all over all these murals with thick 1960s green paint. But with a flashlight, you can still see the That's interesting. They built this house in 1922, but it's really interesting how quickly they tried to associate this property with another tradition, right? Aristocrats are kind of, we really admire them. Us as a world, who else can we emulate? Who else can we love at this moment in time? Some group of people who are amazing, the new gods of the new 20th century, and they're not that far away. Movie stars. It's amazing how quickly this house is Californianized. This is a tax photo of the house back in 1930. I love that. I'm taking away the she's sticking with straight. I'm going to say this one last story, and I'll not deviate. This is, no, I'm not going to say it because we've got to go. I'm going to hear the story. They work hard to Californianize, and all of these images suggest that they're trying hard to California, and that too, I'm going to skip over it. I'm going to skip over this too. Let's just get to the meat. This is the Clarence Bannerberger house, which is built probably a little bit earlier than the 1930s. What is a Spanish colonial revival house doing in Holladay, Utah? Where is this inspiration coming from? This is not the most cinematic house in all of Holladay. This is a wonderful house. I really doubt that if people weren't watching Westerns around this time, they would ever have dreamed up a Pueblo-style house on Cottonwood Lane. You have members of this sect, of this Cottonwood Holladay Mill Creek sect, not just building California here in Utah, but actually moving to California and building there. This is an important house, not just for California history, but for Utah history. This is the Daniel Jackley house. Daniel Jackley, his statue is up at the state capitol as one of the founders of modern Utah. He develops copper mines. He develops magna. What he does with all of his wealth from the hills of Utah is he goes to Woodside, California, and builds this house designed by George Washington Smith. George Washington Smith is a very important architect in California because George Washington Smith is the one who decides that California should have red tile roofs. California should have several walls. California should look like the missions, right? All those missions, they had to climb and cave and the roofs were falling. He's the one who brought all that back. Unfortunately, Daniel Jackley's house lasted up until recently. Then it was sold to a jerk named Steve Jobs. And right before Steve Jobs died of cancer, he demolished it. We have other Utahns associated with California. We'll all be known as Natasha Rambovna. She was one of the many wives of Rita Valentino. This is a painting that exists in the Utah Museum of Fine Arts, given to Utah Museum of Fine Arts by his former wife, Natasha Rogoza. What's interesting is this article, you can't see it, I'm sorry, but there's a Halloween party held at the Clarence Bamberger house, where a guest comes dressed as this character, Rio Fontino's Caballero Verrazano, right? This is not, of course, like dressed up on a day-to-day basis. This is a movie character. And you have that emulated uncommon lane by people at this Halloween party given at the Clarence Bamberger house. As Hollywood develops, it sort of leaves this California element and becomes glamorized along with the culture of Hollywood. And you start to see bits and pieces of a style called a Hollywood Regency style, imported into Holliday's houses and Milton's houses. This is one of the royal houses. This is all designed by George Scanlon in the sort of Hollywood Regency style. This is a staircase in the Livingston house, which a lot of you know on Holladay Boulevard. The staircase of this very craftsman style house should look like this. But in the 1930s, someone said, what? And they imported this, which I just Googled Hollywood Regency staircase and this came up. You see how they're trying to modernize. This culture of Hollywood is huge. There are all sorts of connections happening between people here in Utah and people there in Hollywood. Probably the best expression of this Hollywood Regency style is what happens to Glenwood. Glenwood is a very complicated house. Of course, it starts like this. Oh, you remember Glenwood, Walker Estate. And then, unfortunately, I forgot to drop the other slide here. Here's a bunch of Boy Scouts in Glenwood. What's interesting is they reformat Glenwood and they changed the date. Now it says 1921 rather than 1870, whatever it was. And I have a picture of what the rest of the house looked like. And I forgot to put in my slide presentation, but I have it here on my computer, and maybe we can see it. They did one of the dogs, you see. And they get to a traditional foursquare. It's around 1921. I'm sorry, you guys can look at this after. But it becomes foursquare. And then, at some point, when Walker Wallace, who is Matthew Wallace's daughter, Matthew Wallace gets the bank, Matthew Walker gets the bank, Joseph Walker and his children get the store. The store goes belly up. That was George Walker, Raymond Walker, right? This is Glenn Walker Wallace. They're the bank people, and they retain their money. And Glenn Walker Wallace ultimately marries John Wallace, who then becomes president of the Walker Bank. And together, they do a number on Glenwood. It goes from essentially this to this. This is the best photo I have. This is the tax photo. It seems like the only thing that survives in sort of reference is this arch. And then you have to remember this house is pink. Not just pink, it's Hollywood pink. Think Beverly Hills Hotel pink. Think, I don't know, the Royal Hawaiian pink, right? Or Country Club pink. This is actually not a country club. This is Montpelier, James Madison's house. After the DuPont family gets done with it in the 30s, they do to James Madison's house, one of the framers of the Constitution, what Glenn Walker Wallace does to Glenwood. And of course, pink is symbolic, right? Pink is a Hollywood color. It represents leisure, right? It represents the ability to take time off. That's the same as leisure. It represents luxury, right? It's your grandmother's bathroom pink, right? Another space, right? It's supposed to be leisure. And if anyone has a pink bathroom, don't take it out. What it means. Pink is a very important color to people in this mid-20th century. You think of the Victorian bathroom, right? That was just a very masculine place to get business done, right? And this is a place where you can feel a little bit like a Hollywood star, right? Whether you're Glenn Walker Wallace or whether you're
just Suzy Q down the street. You go inside, you see images of, this is Glenn Wallace. I love this portrait. This is so Hollywood. This is actually, she's a star of Judy Collins. Judy Garland. What's her name? Joan Crawford. Joan Crawford. This is Joan Crawford. He's here. Joan Crawford, and her living room is a little bit more progressive than Glenn Wallace. But there's the same feel, right? You can easily be a movie star. You almost feel like Glenn Wallace is walking down the stairs, and at the foot of the stairs, she'll say, I'm ready for my close-up. And then on the inside, you have, as well, a very Hollywood feel. This is where I'm going to end my talk for the purpose of brevity. I'm going to tie this house back to what was said about Poggio Arcana and the Villa Medici. I was actually talking to Scott, who's there in the audience, 3 years ago. This is where I got the bull in trouble with Scott. And Scott knew Glenn Wallace and spent time with her. Whenever he'd go to her house, there were always flowers on the table, flowers throughout the house, in the garden. And in fact, when Glenn Wallace died, and they had the estate sale, Scott bought this tablecloth, which he oftentimes saw used on the table. It has lilies of the valley, and this was one of Glenn Wallace's favorite flowers, especially in early spring. Her house would be filled with these lilies of the valley.
Well, the tablecloth was commissioned and had a surtout for a ceramic centerpiece to mimic the garden.
Yeah.
And it was when the lily of the valley were in bloom. It was a blood-shaped shield.
Yeah. So in many ways, what we're doing at Glenwood is what we did even in the Renaissance, right? Bringing the outside in, the inside out, and making a complete work of art. And making the type of house, a villa, which can take care of all your needs, access to nature, and essentially express your total self, or at least as you would like to be portrayed to your visitors and the people who come and see you. There's a lot more to say about Holladay and Milford's villas, but I'm going to call it a night because I did keep you 15 minutes over. I apologize. I don't know if you want to have questions.
I want to know about that bird.
Oh.
No.
Well, we're going to want to answer it.
Yes.
Those of you who need to leave, you can't. This is an interesting urn. Going back to my grandmother's house. So this is an urn that features. This urn is the same as this. And I grew up seeing this at my grandmother's house, and I thought, what an ugly thing. And then I saw it in this tax photo picture that I pulled when I was doing this National Register nomination. I said, wait a second, I know that thing. And sure enough, cast off into the bushes, half buried in the dirt, was this urn. And I started researching this urn, and it turns out this urn is obviously valuable. In a shop in Los Angeles, this did get about $15,000 or $20,000. And the reason why is because it is a hillside urn. And hillside urns were urns that were produced for the gardens of early Hollywood stars. They were a specific type of production that are still popular with Hollywood stars today. This is Diane Keaton's living room. She's really big into California, early California, the 1930s. So this is hillside, this is hillside, this is hillside, that's hillside, that's hillside, that's hillside, that's hillside, that's hillside. And they're fabulously expensive now. When they're fabulously expensive then, what I started to see when I looked around my grandmother's garden is just how much hillside there was. There was a sundial. That's hillside. There was this bench with kind of, I don't know, slaves holding up. And then there were these other huge urns scattered all throughout the garden. And all of these were bought by the original owner. And these are not just mere ceramics. These mere urns that they're bringing back just because they look cool.
they're just too heavy. I mean, 1920s, 30s, I get all this stuff you have to really want it. And people are doing this there, Californianizing the house. Right? They're saying, we understand that the kill culture is shifting, and what's cool back in the pre-World War II days is no longer cool today. And we're going to try really hard to associate ourselves, even through our garden ornamentation, with the cool kids in California. And we're going to show through our material culture that we're part of that crowd. Can't imagine why else would Hall huge all the way from Los Angeles to your garden in Holladay, Utah. Just so many excuses everywhere.
What do you know about the art of the state?
Now, there are a lot of states that I am familiar with by name primarily. Part of what makes this research so hard is that a lot of these states are not really well known, right? They exist behind high hedges and long driveways. So, what I'm able to pull, I pull through tax credit or tax photos and what is available in the special collections of you or the Utah Historical Society. But there's just not a lot on all the houses that are constructed in Holladay. So I'm afraid the answer is not much. Anyone else have any questions? Go ahead.
The Hensey House.
The Hensey House?
Yeah.
I
saw it very first.
You guys you're welcome to ask me about specific properties, but I am concerned that I'm pinning you to your chairs. I want you to go home. I guess that was a fancy way of saying I don't like that. So no. I asked me questions and I don't answer. There are just so many houses in Holladay, and most of them just scared about tricks. Go ahead.
On your grandmother's house, tell us about the driveway. It has a hole looking down into the street.
Well, it's a driveway with a hole in the street, and probably the most interesting thing to tell you is that, and I was mentioning this to someone else, my grandparents were great entertainers. And you can always tell who had a lot of fun at my grandmother's parties by who maybe got on the stage, as they walked down the driveway, fell into the street. That's actually pretty common. So it's an interesting driveway because, and they wanted to show the stream even as it passed through the driveway. And so what they did is they cut a hole, leaving tracks for the automobile to go up, but the stream would be visible through this hole. Everybody always fell into the hole. So the moral of the story is it was very picturesque by day, but by night it was pretty hazardous.
Has there been progress in the United States?
Well, there are some that have been, can I be honest? No.
Yeah.
The problem with Holladay and Mill Creek is that there's just too much money here. And money is not only a problem when there's too little of it and the houses fall apart, but when there's too much of it, people like to build. And the houses quickly lose their integrity. So, I would say that's probably the number one problem. People who like to watch HGTV, trust me, you not need to make your house open plan, you not need to glass, all that stuff will be garbage here in 5 to 10 years. Keep your house as it is. Keep your pink bathroom. That will be a treasure. In fact, the already is. Not enough.
Don't paint the brick.
Don't paint the brick. Thank you. Someone said, don't paint the brick. Especially in your house.
Did they just break down the water and stay?
They did. I would rather not talk about that. They did. Part of the problem, again, with that house is people kept fiddling with it. So it had its massing. It was still intact in terms of its massing. But, gosh, there was some crazy stuff done to the interior. It's probably a great example of just too much money. Leave your house alone. It's great the way it is. Even your 1980s white oak kitchen will be amazing here. 50 years. Hold on. Any other questions?
Was it Glenn Walker Wallace that had the huge influence bringing like Symphony, Valley West, that kind of culture?
Yeah, Glenn Walker Wallace really is an unsung hero. In fact, this is a story that Scott tells. She was able to travel to Europe and to fabulous places as a child. And she came home and she said to her father, Matthew Walker, Dad, you live in a cowboy. Right? Ain't nothing happening here in Salt Lake. And to his credit, he said to Glenn, well, your job is to improve it. And that's what she said in the lecture. We have the symphony, we have the ballet, we probably have the opera, because of Glenn Walker Wallace. She says in her obituary, she says, I've been writing text to cover deficits for as long as I can remember. Right? Deficits gone. I just wish she was around to ever find it.
Do you know anything about Dee Dee Allen's place or the history of her social circle? I can't wait.
She's associated with Allen Park. It was just made into a Salt Lake City park. Yeah, that is a fascinating family.
Yeah.
I want to know more. I was talking to Annie Wallace and Matthew Wallace this past winter. It was like February. So Eddie and Matthew are Glenn Walker Wallace's grandchildren. I was talking to them, and I said, please tell me about Glenn, what was it like? Because they essentially grew up with Glenn Walker Wallace, I understand, is a very powerful personality. When she wanted her grandkids, she got them. And so they essentially grew up in Glenwood. And they didn't want to talk about Glenwood, they wanted to talk about the Allens. That was what made an impression on them. I would love to know if her house is still there. You cannot, I don't know if his house was amazing. It was one of those cobble creations, like a judge house.
Well, the Cheeseman house is still there.
Is that-
You referenced them earlier.
I've never seen that.
That was where in Bonanza. It's still there.
Oh, was it? Was it not painted and remodeled? Yeah. All right. Can I let you go?
Quickly, we want to thank David. I want to thank him personally for saving my green bathroom. Visit to our home.
Hey, Green, David.
Yep. An honorarium. Thank you, and for your pink bathroom. But yes, we have passing around there a sign-up sheet for contact information. This is the third in a series of speakers on preservation. In January, we'll transition to a speaker, Forrest Kutch, on local Native American history, which should be pretty interesting. Thanks, David.